One of the greatest misunderstandings in life is this idea that the goal is to be comfortable. From the time we're young, we're conditioned to seek ease. We're told to pursue stability, to minimize risk, and to avoid discomfort. It sounds harmless enough, doesn't it? After all, who wouldn't want a smooth ride, free of struggle and hardship? But what they don't tell you is that comfort, real sustained comfort, can be dangerous. Not because it feels good, but because it silently kills potential. It lulls you into a state of quiet compromise. It gently persuades you to stay where it's warm, where it's safe, and where it's familiar. And in doing so, it robs you of the one thing you absolutely need in order to evolve: challenge. Comfort is not the friend it pretends to be. It's a trap, a slow, subtle seduction. It gives you just enough to keep you from moving, but never enough to make you feel truly alive. It whispers that you've earned the right to stop, that you've done enough, that there's no need to stretch further. But the truth is, comfort and growth cannot coexist for long. One must always give way to the other. You cannot rise while you remain anchored to what's easy. If you think back to the moments in your life that shaped you, truly shaped you, you'll notice a pattern. They weren't comfortable. They were messy, unpredictable, painful even, but they demanded something from you. They pulled you out of your routine and forced you to become more than you were. Maybe it was a job you weren't ready for. Maybe it was a heartbreak that shattered your assumptions. Maybe it was the day you finally got tired of being average. Whatever it was, it disrupted your comfort, and in doing so, it woke you up. Growth does not come wrapped in a soft blanket. It comes dressed in sweat and uncertainty. It looks like early mornings and late nights. It feels like frustration, doubt, and effort, and yes, sometimes it even feels like failure. But failure is not the enemy either. In fact, failure is often just growth in disguise. It's comfort that's the real enemy. Because comfort asks nothing of you. It requires no courage, no strength, no commitment. It simply asks that you stay the same. And staying the same in a world that is constantly changing is the most dangerous decision you can make. We live in a culture obsessed with convenience, fast results, instant gratification, effortless success. But nothing lasting ever comes from ease. Muscles don't grow without resistance. Skills don't sharpen without repetition. Wisdom doesn't appear without experience. Everything meaningful in your life, your values, your relationships, your achievements, was born from effort, from pushing past what was comfortable and into what was necessary. Think about the last time you challenged yourself, really challenged yourself. Remember how uncertain it felt in the beginning? Remember how part of you wanted to quit? Now think about what happened when you pushed through. Think about the pride you felt, the confidence you built. That's the power of stepping beyond the boundary of comfort. It's not just about success. It's about discovering who you really are when life demands more from you, because inside each of us is a version that only appears under pressure. A version that is stronger, wiser, more capable. But you can't meet that version of yourself if you're always seeking comfort. There is nothing wrong with rest. There is nothing wrong with recovery. But rest must follow effort, not replace it. Comfort is not a lifestyle, it's a pit stop. It's meant to refresh you, not contain you. And if you mistake comfort for success, you will spend your life circling the same loop, doing just enough to survive, never enough to transform. You have more in you, not because I say so, but because deep down, you know it. You've felt the tug of something greater. You've sensed that your current life, while stable, isn't the limit. You've had moments where you glimpsed your potential, brief flashes of what you could be if you really committed. And those moments don't come from comfort. They come from movement, from action, from choosing to do the hard thing. Not because you have to, but because you should. So the next time comfort calls you, when it tells you to skip the gym, to stay in bed, to avoid the challenge, remember this: every time you choose comfort, you trade a piece of your growth. And over time, that trade becomes expensive, not in dollars, but in potential, in purpose, in pride. Growth is not found in the safety of the known. It's found in the wild edges of who you could become. If only you had the courage to step outside of what's easy. We often wait for a breakthrough, a big moment, a surge of motivation, something dramatic to shake the ground and spark lasting change. And because we're waiting for something big, we overlook the small. We underestimate the power of consistency. The truth is, your life doesn't change all at once. It changes little by little, decision by decision, habit by habit. That's how real transformation happens, not with a single leap, but with 1,000 quiet steps in the right direction. Small disciplines are easy to do and just as easy not to do. That's the danger. Skipping one workout doesn't seem like a big deal. Sleeping in once doesn't ruin your life. Procrastinating for a day won't collapse your future. But the danger is in the pattern. Because once becomes twice, twice becomes a habit, and a habit becomes your identity. And that's the moment life begins to drift. Not because you made a catastrophic mistake, but because you didn't take your small disciplines seriously. We live in a culture addicted to the idea of overnight success, but what's behind every overnight success? Years of quiet effort, repetition, showing up when no one's watching, doing the work when it isn't exciting. That's where success is born. In the invisible hours when no applause is coming and no rewards are in sight. It's not the intensity of what you do once that changes your life. It's the frequency of what you do daily. Take any area of your life, your body, your finances, your mindset, your relationships. Improvement in any of these areas doesn't require massive action. It requires consistent small action. Drinking more water, saying no to unnecessary spending, replacing 10 minutes of scrolling with 10 minutes of reading, making a phone call just to say I appreciate you. These aren't grand gestures, but done consistently, they shape your future. And here's the best part, small disciplines work like compound interest. At first, the growth is invisible. You won't feel like anything's changing, but over time, those small actions start to build. Day by day, they stack, and one morning you wake up and realize you're no longer who you used to be. You're stronger, clearer, more confident, not because you did something huge, but because you stayed faithful to something small. But don't be fooled, discipline is rarely convenient. It doesn't always feel good in the moment. It often feels like a sacrifice. You'll be tempted to skip it. You'll rationalize and say, what's one day? But remember, every decision counts. Every time you honor your discipline, you build momentum. Every time you choose what's right over what's easy, you prove something to yourself, that you can be trusted with your own potential. And that's what this is really about, trust. When you commit to small disciplines, you build a kind of internal credibility. You start believing in your word again. That's why people who are consistent, even in small ways, walk with more confidence. They don't need to fake it. They know they're doing the work. They don't feel like imposters because their habits tell the truth. They don't need validation because their actions are aligned with their vision. If you want to change your life, stop trying to do everything. Stop chasing shortcuts and miracle cures. Start with one small discipline, one action you can repeat daily no matter what. Something so simple it almost feels silly. Because that's where it begins, not in the applause of the crowd, but in the silence of your own commitment. And if you can keep that promise to yourself, day after day, without needing permission or praise, then the rest will follow. Because small disciplines don't stay small. They grow, they multiply, they become habits. Habits become character, and character shapes destiny. There's a truth about life that many people never fully grasp. You're either growing or you're decaying. There's no middle ground. No such thing as staying still. Life doesn't pause just because you do. The world keeps moving, and if you're not moving with it, developing, stretching, evolving, then by default, you're falling behind. It might not be obvious at first. Decay doesn't always show up as disaster. It shows up as stagnation, as complacency, as slowly settling for less than you're capable of. Growth isn't always loud. It doesn't always announce itself with milestones and celebrations. Sometimes growth is quiet. It happens in the discomfort of learning something new, in the humility of failing forward, in the discipline of showing up even when you don't feel like it. But make no mistake, when you're committed to growing, you know it. You feel it. You may be tired, but you're alive. You're stretched, but you're expanding. You're uncomfortable, but you're becoming more. Now contrast that with decay. It's subtle at first. You stop setting goals, you lose your curiosity, you go through the motions day in and day out, telling yourself, this is fine. You tell yourself you're just maintaining, just taking it easy. But what you're really doing is shrinking your standards, shrinking your effort, shrinking your potential. And the worst part, you don't even realize it's happening until the gap between who you are and who you could have been starts to hurt. People don't wake up one morning feeling unfulfilled because of one bad choice. It happens over time. When you stop challenging yourself, when you stop reading, stop reflecting, stop taking on things that scare you a little. Growth always requires a stretch. It asks something of you, and when you refuse to stretch, you don't just stay the same, you get smaller. And we were not meant to be static. There's something in the human spirit that hungers for evolution, for progress, for movement. Look at nature. A tree is either growing taller or beginning to rot. A body is either building strength or losing it. A relationship is either deepening or drifting. It's a law of life. Nothing stays still for long. So the question is never, am I growing fast enough? The question is, am I growing at all? Because even a small movement forward is better than sitting idle, letting your fire go out. Some people confuse aging with growing, but they're not the same. Just because time is passing doesn't mean you're making progress. Growth is not automatic, it's intentional. It takes awareness. It takes effort. It requires that you keep asking, what's next for me? What can I improve? Where am I settling? Without that mindset, you begin to coast, and coasting feels nice until you realize you've been headed downhill the whole time. There's a quiet danger in success too. Sometimes after we've reached a certain level, we start to relax. We tell ourselves we've arrived, we take our foot off the gas, and before long what once felt like a victory becomes a ceiling. Growth doesn't stop just because you reached a goal. In fact, real growth begins the moment you realize that no matter how far you've come, there's still more inside you. And it's not about being unhappy with where you are, it's about refusing to believe that this is all you were meant for. It's about having the humility to say, there's still more to learn, more to give, more to become. Growth doesn't require perfection, but it does demand progress. And progress can be messy, it can be uncomfortable, but it is always worth it. Because when you grow, you feel alive, you feel connected to something greater than the routine of survival. You feel purpose, you feel movement. So if life feels dull, if your energy feels low, if your days feel like copies of each other, it might be time to ask yourself a hard question. Have I stopped growing? Because once you stop growing, even if the world doesn't notice right away, your spirit does. Self-respect doesn't come from what you say. It comes from what you do when no one's watching. It's built in silence, in those small, private moments when you could cut corners, but you don't. When you could give in to comfort, but you choose the hard path anyway. That's where it's forged. Not in the spotlight, not in applause, but in self-discipline. Discipline is the act of keeping a promise to yourself. And every time you keep that promise, whether it's waking up early, finishing what you started, eating what you know you should, showing up when it's easier not to, you send a powerful message to your mind and heart. I can trust myself. And that trust over time becomes self-respect. It becomes a foundation, something unshakable. See, self-respect isn't given. It isn't inherited. It isn't something you can fake. You don't get it from titles, money, or the approval of others. You earn it. You earn it through choices, through discipline, through doing what needs to be done, especially when it's inconvenient, especially when you don't feel like it. That's what separates those who merely survive from those who thrive. Not talent, not luck, but discipline. The quiet daily decision to choose what's right over what's easy. Think about the times in your life when you felt proud, not of what others saw, but of what you knew. Maybe it was sticking to a commitment. Maybe it was staying true to your word. Maybe it was resisting a temptation that once controlled you. That's self-respect. That's the deep, quiet power that grows inside you when you refuse to betray yourself. On the other hand, every time you break a promise to yourself, every time you procrastinate, quit early, cheat on your own standards, you chip away at your self-respect. You may not feel it immediately, but over time it shows. You start doubting yourself. You start hesitating. You start needing others to validate what you should already know. That's what happens when discipline slips. Confidence fades, clarity dims. And what's left is a person who no longer feels worthy of their own potential. But the good news is you can build it back. Not with grand gestures, not with public declarations, but with small, consistent acts of self-discipline. Every time you choose to do what you said you would, you take a step forward. Every time you show up, despite the excuses, despite the discomfort, you reclaim a piece of your power, and the more you do it, the more you start to believe again. Believe that you're capable, that you're in control, that you're becoming the kind of person you once only imagined. Discipline is hard, no one denies that, but so is regret, so is guilt. So is looking in the mirror and not liking what you see because you know you could have done more, could have been more. Discipline is the harder choice in the moment, but it's the easier life in the long run. Because it brings order, it brings stability, it brings pride, and most of all, it brings respect, not from others, but from the one person who matters most, you. You can fool the world, but you can't fool yourself. Deep down, you always know when you've settled. You always know when you've taken the easy way out, and that knowledge lingers. It eats away at your confidence. It keeps you from showing up fully in life. But when you live with discipline, when you honor your own standards, there's a strength in your step, a certainty in your voice. You don't have to shout. You don't have to prove. You know who you are because you've paid the price to become that person. There's something electric about motivation, that spark of inspiration, that rush of energy. You watch a powerful video, hear an inspiring speech, or have a conversation that stirs your soul, and suddenly you're ready, you're fired up. You start dreaming bigger, planning faster, committing harder. Motivation is that emotional high, the ignition to the engine of change, and it's beautiful. But here's the truth most people don't want to face. Motivation fades. That's right. No matter how strong the feeling is in the beginning, it wears off. Life shows up, distractions multiply, resistance creeps in, and the voice that once said, "Let's go," starts whispering maybe later. And if you're relying on motivation to carry you through the journey, that's when you stop. That's when the momentum dies. That's when the dream quietly slips through your fingers, not because you weren't capable, but because you didn't bring discipline to the table. Discipline is what takes over when motivation walks out the door. It's what shows up in the rain, in the boredom, in the exhaustion, and says, "We're doing this anyway." Discipline doesn't care how you feel. It doesn't wait for the right mood. It's not interested in inspiration. It's loyal to your values. It's the internal agreement you made with yourself, and it holds the line when your emotions try to negotiate. You see, motivation is about feelings. Discipline is about identity. Motivation says, "I feel like doing this." Discipline says, "This is who I am." And the people who build extraordinary lives, the ones who reach levels others only talk about, aren't the ones who felt motivated every day. They're the ones who did it regardless. They pushed through fatigue, through resistance, through temptation, and they did it again and again until it became who they were, not just something they tried. Think about anything worthwhile in life: building a strong body, growing a business, mastering a skill, raising a family, deepening your character. None of that can be achieved through short bursts of motivation. It's built in the trenches. It's built in repetition, in sacrifice, in routine. You don't get strong by lifting weights once when you feel inspired. You get strong by lifting again and again when it's inconvenient, uncomfortable, and unglamorous. That's where the gap is. That's where most people fall. They chase the high of motivation, and when it runs out, they interpret that as a sign to quit, but it's not a sign, it's a test. A test to see if you were serious, if you meant what you said, if your commitment was deeper than your mood. Because when the feelings fade, only discipline will carry you forward. And here's the beauty of discipline. It creates its own motivation. Once you get a few wins under your belt, once you start seeing progress, even small progress, you begin to feel that fire again. You realize you don't have to wait for inspiration. You can create it by doing the work, by showing up, by proving to yourself, one action at a time, that you are who you said you'd become. It's easy to talk about goals. It's exciting to write them down, but the real transformation doesn't come from the list, it comes from the labor. And labor requires discipline. It requires showing up on the days when it's boring, on the days when nobody's cheering, on the days when every part of you wants to take the easy route. That's when your future's being built, not in the spark of day one, but in the silence of day 100. When you're still doing the work even after the emotion is gone. You become what you tolerate. That statement is more than a warning, it's a mirror. Because whether you realize it or not, the standards you accept, the behaviors you let slide, the excuses you allow to settle in, all of it becomes who you are. Not overnight, not in dramatic moments, but gradually, quietly, Most people don't end up with average lives because they aimed low. They ended up there because they got comfortable with things that chipped away at their greatness. A little laziness here, a little procrastination there, letting one missed workout slide, telling themselves, I'll start tomorrow, and before they know it, they've built a lifestyle around avoiding discomfort and justifying mediocrity. Start small. You hit snooze one morning, no big deal. Then it becomes 2 days, a week, a month. Now, waking up late is your new norm, not because you planned it, but because you tolerated it. And that's the truth most people run from. Your habits are shaped not just by your ambitions, but by what you allow. Every time you let something slide, you're sending a signal to yourself, this is okay. You're training your mind to accept less than your potential. And over time, those compromises stack up. They become your identity. You stop expecting more from yourself. You stop challenging your limits. And worst of all, you start believing that this is just who you are. But it's not who you are, it's who you've allowed yourself to become. The truth is, you've got greatness inside you. You've got strength, discipline, fire. But if you keep tolerating behaviors that contradict that, you'll never access it. You can't expect to live a powerful life while accepting weak standards. The two are incompatible. Look around at your life, your relationships, your finances, your health, your mindset. Every part of your life right now is a reflection of what you've been tolerating. Maybe you've tolerated a lack of boundaries in your relationships. Maybe you've tolerated a lack of structure in your daily routine. Maybe you've tolerated fear and allowed it to dictate your decisions. Whatever it is, it's not there by accident. It's there because at some point you said, this is fine, even if deep down you knew it wasn't. But here's the thing, you can change it. The moment you raise your standards and stop tolerating what's holding you back, everything begins to shift because life responds to your expectations. When you demand more from yourself, you start behaving differently. You speak differently. You walk differently. You no longer settle for just enough. You start aiming for what you deserve, not what you've been settling for. Now that shift isn't easy. It means confronting yourself. It means drawing lines in the sand and saying no more. No more skipping what matters. No more excuses dressed up as reasons. No more pretending that good enough is acceptable. Raising your standards is uncomfortable. But you know what's more uncomfortable? living a life that doesn't reflect your true power. And it's not just about the big things, it's the daily choices, the things you let into your space, the people you surround yourself with, the thoughts you allow to take root in your mind, because you don't just become what you do, you become what you tolerate in every corner of your life. Tolerate negativity, you'll start thinking smaller. Tolerate chaos, you'll start living scattered. Tolerate disrespect from others or from yourself, you'll begin to believe that's what you're worth. So if you're feeling stuck, ask yourself, what have I been tolerating? What have I allowed that's been keeping me small? Because once you become aware of it, you have the power to change it. And when you stop tolerating what weakens you, you start making room for what strengthens you. People often think excellence is a moment, a shining achievement, a big win, that one speech that leaves the crowd on their feet, that one record-breaking performance, that one headline-grabbing promotion. But that's not how it works. Excellence isn't about a moment of glory. It's about a life of consistent effort. It's not built in the spotlight. It's forged in the shadows, in repetition, in routine. Excellence is a habit. The truth is, the world only sees the outcome. They see the gold medal, not the early mornings and aching muscles. They hear the standing ovation, not the 100 failed attempts before the words finally landed. But you know what greatness actually looks like behind the curtain? Boredom, discipline, repetition, doing the right thing even when it feels ordinary, because excellence isn't about doing it once, it's about doing it every single time, whether someone's watching or not. Look at anyone who has achieved true mastery in their field. Artists, athletes, leaders, thinkers. None of them got there by chasing moments. They built systems. They built routines. They showed up even when they were tired, even when they didn't feel inspired, even when the outcome wasn't guaranteed. That's the habit of excellence, is showing up and giving your best, not once, but daily. Not when it's easy, but when it's hard, especially when it's hard. You see, the mistake many people make is thinking they can rise to the occasion, that when the moment comes, they'll be ready, they'll perform, they'll deliver, but the moment doesn't make you, it reveals you. You don't rise to the occasion, you fall to the level of your training. And if your training was inconsistent, so will your results be. But if your training was relentless, if you've been building those habits of excellence daily, then when the moment comes, you won't have to rise. You'll just execute it. Excellence isn't a decision you make when opportunity knocks. It's a lifestyle you live every day. So when that door opens, you walk through it without hesitation. You've already paid the price. You've already put in the hours. You don't need luck. You've got preparation. You don't need hype. You've got discipline. And that's the real power of habit. When you've built excellence into the fabric of who you are, it doesn't take effort to be great. It becomes your default. It becomes automatic. You don't need to hype yourself up to do what's right. You don't need someone to motivate you to keep pushing. You've already decided who you are. You've already wired it into your daily action. Think about how much time we waste chasing motivation, chasing inspiration, chasing perfect conditions. But the person who lives with habits of excellence doesn't need any of that. They've built a rhythm, a routine. They've turned greatness into something sustainable, not a fluke, not a phase, but a standard. And that's what separates those who touch greatness from those who live in it. Anyone can have a good day. Anyone can pull off one moment of brilliance, but can you do it again tomorrow? Can you show up when no one's clapping? Can you stay consistent when there's no fire, just routine? That's what excellence demands, not flashes of brilliance, but reliability, commitment, mastery in the mundane. It's not glamorous, but it's transformational. Because when you train yourself to act with excellence in the small things, it spills into everything else. The way you walk into a room, the way you handle setbacks, the way you treat people, it becomes who you are. Excellence isn't something you do occasionally, it's something you embody daily.